Welcome to Whispers in the Dark, where every shadow hides a secret, and every tale leaves a scar. Here, we unravel the forgotten, the cursed, and the damned. Dim the lights, lock the doors, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely, because some stories don't like being told.
The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the sprawling estate that had once been the heart of the Whitmore family. Ivy clung to the brick walls like a shroud, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and nostalgia. Clara Whitmore stood at the threshold of her childhood home, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. It had been a decade since she last set foot in the grand old house, and now, with her husband, Mark, and their two dogs, Baxter and Luna, they were ready to make it their own. As she pushed the heavy oak door open, a creak echoed through the empty halls, a sound that seemed to awaken the very spirits of the house. Clara's mother had called earlier that day, her voice trembling as she recounted the rules that had governed their lives in this place. "Just remember, Clara," she had said, "don't disturb the family below." Clara had brushed off her mother's warnings, convinced that the tales of ghosts and shadows were mere figments of childhood imagination. But as she stepped inside, the air grew colder, and a shiver ran down her spine. The first night in the house was unsettling. The dogs barked at shadows, their growls echoing through the empty rooms. Clara and Mark settled into their new life, but the rules her mother had mentioned lingered in the back of her mind. 1. Never go into the basement after dark. 2. Do not disturb the family below. 3. Always keep the doors locked. 4. If you hear whispers, ignore them. Clara had laughed at the absurdity of it all, but as the days turned into weeks, the whispers began. They were soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but grew louder, more insistent. Mark dismissed her concerns, attributing them to the creaks and groans of an old house settling, but Clara could feel it. Something was watching, waiting. One evening, Clara decided to explore the basement, curiosity gnawing at her like an itch she couldn't ignore. She descended the narrow staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was dark, filled with old furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts of the past. As she moved deeper into the shadows, she stumbled upon a door she had never seen before, its surface worn and splintered. Against her better judgment, Clara turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, she found remnants of a family long forgotten. Faded photographs, dusty toys, a child's shoe, and a rocking chair that swayed gently as if someone had just left it. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more frantic. Clara felt a chill run down her spine as she turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. Panic surged through her. She rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers swelled around her until one voice broke through, clear and small. "Don't be scared," it said. A pale boy stood in the corner, no older than 7, his eyes wide and sorrowful. "You're Clara, aren't you? They told us your name." Clara backed against the wall, trembling. "Who are you?" The boy stepped closer, his translucent form flickering like candlelight. "We lived here.
My name was Eli. We were the family below." Clara's throat tightened. "What happened to you?" The boy hesitated, then pointed toward the ceiling. "Your parents, they made a deal."
Mark, sensing something was wrong, rushed down the stairs. He found Clara trapped, pale and unresponsive, her eyes fixed on something beyond his sight. With a forceful shove, he broke the door open. Clara collapsed into his arms, whispering, "They were real. They're still here." Mark looked around the room, confused. "What do you mean? What did you see?" Clara shook her head, tears brimming. "Not what. Who? The family below. They didn't vanish. They were taken." That night, Clara lay awake, piecing together fragments of what Eli had told her. Her parents had never mentioned the Whitmores having tenants, let alone a family with children. And now there was a boy with no shadow, a rocking chair that moved on its own, and whispers that knew her name. The next day, Clara called her mother. There was no pleasantry in her voice, only urgency. "What did you do? Why didn't you tell me about the family?" There was a long pause. Her mother's voice, when it came, was fragile and brittle. "We didn't have a choice. Times were hard. Your father, we were about to lose everything." "What did you do?" Clara repeated. "We made a deal. A presence, an entity. It came to us in the middle of the night, just days after that family moved in. It offered us salvation, wealth, peace, a long life, but it asked for something in return, a sacrifice." Clara felt sick. "You gave them the family." "I didn't know what it would do to them, only that they would be gone. Then the rules appeared, written in chalk on the walls of the basement. I didn't write them, I swear it." Clara hung up, her hands trembling. Eli's words echoed in her mind. "They told us your name." That night, Clara and Mark descended once more into the basement, their steps heavy with dread. The air was thick and oppressive, charged with something old and watching. Clara reached the strange door, her hand hesitating before the knob. Inside, the room had changed. The outlines of the family emerged from the shadows. Eli, his baby sister, a mother clutching a locket, a father with sorrow etched deep into his eyes. The rocking chair creaked slowly, keeping a rhythm with the whispers. "We're still here," Eli said. "Trapped. It took us, but didn't finish the deal. The house became our cage." Clara's voice quivered. "How do I help you?" Eli looked at her with eyes far too wise for his age. "You must break the promise your parents made. Renounce the deal. Face what comes." Clara glanced at Mark, who nodded silently. They stood hand in hand as Clara called into the shadows. "We reject the pact. Whatever my family promised, it ends now." The air grew thick with wind and light. The shadows twisted, resisting, screaming, writhing. But the whispers began to change. They softened. The figures of the family began to glow, their pain lifting as the chains that bound them dissolved into light. One by one, they turned and walked into the brightness. Eli lingered a moment longer. "Thank you," he said softly, then vanished.
The next morning, the house felt different. For the first time since their arrival, the air was still, not heavy or cold, but calm. The whispering had stopped. The shadows no longer clung to corners. It was as if the very bones of the mansion had exhaled. Clara stood in the front hall, staring at the family portrait that hung crooked on the wall. She hadn't noticed it before. Perhaps she had never really looked. Her parents, young and proud. She, a baby, in her mother's arms. And behind them, in the corner of the image, barely visible, a shadow where none should have been. She touched the frame, then stepped back. The truth of what had happened in this house was no longer a secret buried beneath years of silence. It lived in her now, in her blood, in her memory, and in the choice she had made. Mark entered the room holding 2 mugs of coffee. He placed one in her hand and asked, "Do you think it's really over?" Clara looked around. The house no longer groaned. The basement door no longer felt like it was watching. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But they're free. That has to mean something." She hadn't told her mother everything, just that the family had found peace. Her mother wept in silence, perhaps for them, or perhaps for herself. The rules that had governed their lives were gone now, erased from the walls, but their meaning lingered, like echoes of a warning. Never go into the basement after dark. Do not disturb the family below. Always keep the doors locked. If you hear whispers, ignore them. They weren't just rules, they were confessions, signs of guilt and cowardice passed off as caution. And now they were Clara's burden to carry, but not her shame. She had broken the cycle, faced what her parents never could. As the days passed, the mansion felt less like a place of shadows and more like a home, one still steeped in history, but no longer haunted by it. Clara and Mark walked the halls not as caretakers of a cursed legacy, but as witnesses to its end. And though the past could never be undone, it had been faced with truth, with courage, and in the end, with compassion. And in that, there was peace.
Thank you for listening to Whispering in the Dark. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to Haunted Mansion Stories for more chilling tales from the shadows. Every listen, comment, and follow helps us keep the darkness alive, one whisper at a time.